You and other patriots like you across this nation are the skinny little thread that's holding our country to freedom, and we want to thank you for that fight. I want to read you a short quote, which you've probably seen before. Perhaps you've seen this on some of Joanne's emails or writings. It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keep on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. That's Samuel Adams. Thank you for what you do. Okay, Ashton, would you come up, please, and introduce our speaker?
Thank you. We have a real treat today. The speaker is Professor Jeffrey F. Addicott. He's a professor of law and the director of the Center for Terrorism Law at St. Mary's University of Law in San Antonio. He is currently participating in public awareness and law enforcement training efforts regarding national security threats from an open southern border. He served as an active duty Army officer in the Judge Advocate General Corps for 20 years, where he spent a quarter of his career as a senior legal advisor to the U.S. Army Special Forces. He retired in 2000 at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He's an internationally recognized expert in terrorism law. He's a regular contributor to Fox News, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal. He has given over 600 speeches and over 4,000 media interviews. He's published over 60 books, chapters, and law review articles on national security issues. His most recent book is Terrorism Law, Cases, Materials, and Comments. And he'll have a few of those available for sale afterwards. And I would like you to give a warm welcome to Professor Adams.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And before I start, I've got to give my usual disclaimer. The Dean always wants me to tell audiences that the views I give today do not reflect St. Mary's University School of Law. So if you call up the Dean and tell him that I believe in the death penalty, they already know it. I am actually probably the most conservative law professor in the United States of America. And of course, there's not much competition for that title, but I did get to debate the most liberal law professor a few years ago by the name of Susan Herman from NYU in Boston. And the topic, of course, was, she was the president of the ACLU also. The topic was, Gitmo's evil and drones are evil and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was quite an event because I'm not a holy roller, but the audience was filled with hundreds and hundreds of people that came out of the ACLU subunits from 4 states around, and they were elevating out of their seats when I got through with her, because liberals aren't very intelligent people, but they can be very emotional, as you well know. And so before we get started today, I would like to spend just a couple of minutes talking about our Center for Terrorism Law, and then we'll talk about our topic du jour, which of course is radical Islam and the impact on our national security. I retired after 20 years, that's true. I came to Texas. I'm from Alabama originally, and when I got here, of course, we had 9/11 that occurred, and I founded the Center for Terrorism Law, and I think the logo's up there behind me. We are the only law school, there's about 200 law schools in the United States. We're the only law school that has anything like this center, and we look at all the legal issues associated with the war on terror. In that context, I've done 2 amicus briefs to the United States Supreme Court. I have been to Guantanamo Bay. I'm the only law professor that works with the government at Guantanamo Bay. Every law school in the country, you can't shake a dead cat without finding somebody that has a clinic that's looking out for the poor little darlings down there. And I also have testified before the U.S. Senate. Recently I testified that waterboarding is not torture on the panel, and this is amazing. The panel was made up of Dick Durbin, Dianne Feinstein, and other people that couldn't think their way out of a wet paper sack. The name of the hearing was, "What went wrong with the Bush administration? Why did they torture people?" That's your tax dollars. They've already made up their mind. They had 4 law professors that appeared, and I basically told them that the waterboarding technique that we used was a joke, an absolute joke. If you want to know what it was like, you can go to Six Flags, pay $60 and do the water ride. And of course, they don't want to hear that. They want to demonize, waterboarding. Their eyes get real big. I don't have time today to tell you how I was able to really, basically show them for what they are. But there is one part of the Torture Convention that I told these senators, I know you're violating the Torture Convention, because the Torture Convention says that if you believe that torture occurred, you must prosecute. And so I told these gentlemen, I said, look, come across the street with me, I'll show you how to fill out the charge sheet at the federal courthouse. And of course they don't want to do that. They want to use these things as political piñatas. And that's the problem we have in this country, of course. We have Democrats and Republicans, and it's a two-party system. And we understand the fact that if the Republicans are in power, the Democrats aren't going to say you're doing a good job. Otherwise, why vote for me? And vice versa. And so when 9/11 occurred, we had a Republican president, George W. Bush, a moderate, I suppose, if you want to label him. And so the Democrats went into him quite viciously. Guantanamo Bay's evil, we torture people there, and all sorts of disinformation. In fact, it's so bad that when I give talks to various audiences, I also give them a little quiz. And you guys are going to pass with flying colors, but I asked them a couple of questions. One, was anybody ever waterboarded at Guantanamo Bay? No, never happened. Factually, it never happened. No one was ever waterboarded at Guantanamo Bay. Did the military ever waterboard any detainees? Nope. Factually, it never happened. The military has never waterboarded a single detainee in the quote-unquote war on terror. How many people were waterboarded? Out of the thousands of detainees that we've apprehended since 9/11, how many actually were waterboarded? 3. That's it. And whoever said that, I got a free pin for you in the back. And that was done by the CIA at off-site locations. Poland. You didn't get that from me. And yet they demonize these things to the point that most of the American people, they haven't got a chance. And so the war is really not just about putting steel on target, it's a propaganda war. And before we do that, of course, we've got to remind ourselves, because the rate of learning has to exceed the rate of forgetting. The rate of learning must exceed the rate of forgetting. What does it mean to be a conservative? When people say, well, I'm a conservative, I'm a liberal, et cetera, et cetera. Conservatives are strict constructionists. They're strict constructionists. We want to know exactly what the founders thought. For example, liberals will say that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment, and they're referring to one of the amendments to the Constitution. Liberals also believe that the Constitution is called a what? A living, breathing document. Now, if that's true, then it's the devil's playground, because it can mean anything, which means it means nothing. And liberals want to shape the Constitution to the changing mores and values of society. Conservatives, we are strict constructionists. We want the people to fit into the Constitution, not the other way around. Liberals view the Constitution as a speed bump on their idea of social utopianism and all sorts of bizarre ideas. So, for example, let's take the proposition that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment. Okay, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Conservatives like Clarence Thomas, we go back in our way, way back machine, we go back to the founders, and if we could have them sitting in a room, we would ask that question. Is the death penalty cruel and unusual punishment? Well, they would say, with a unanimous voice, what most Texans would say, get a rope. Of course it's not cruel and unusual punishment. And therefore, I fully accept the death penalty as legal, and of course it's moral. God holds the record for killing people. In both the Old Testament and New Testament, he clearly says that if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you're a criminal, expect to be executed. Now, whether you go to heaven or hell is a different issue, but on this earth, if you commit a capital offense, it's death. In fact, the Hebrews in the Old Testament, they didn't even have jails because their system of punishment deterred people, and deterrence is a critical factor. And of course, conservatives, not only are we strict constructionists, but we're realists. We understand that God, for example, is a capitalist. He's not a socialist. Thou shalt not steal recognizes the private ownership of property. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they weren't just little goat herders, they were multimillionaires. And yet liberals, of course, believe in this idea that man is inherently good. And of course, we know that that's not true. Man is no damn good. Right? We know that. In fact, that's the premise that our founders had when they put this thing together. When the Constitution was first written and they sent it out to the states for ratification, what did the states do? They gave them half the peace sign. And we're not signing this thing. We just fought a war, a 6-year war against big government. go back to the drawing board and give us a Bill of Rights. They went back to the drawing board, and that's how we got the amendments to the Constitution. And they ensure that we are supposed to be a limited government, a government of the people, limited in nature. And yet, of course, liberals take the exact opposite view. So along comes President Obama following President Bush. And of course, in a very Orwellian style, he's extremely schizophrenic. I met President Bush 5 times when I ran my Center for Terrorism Law during the Bush administration. I went to his ranch, he knew me by first name, and I would give constructive criticism. And he could take it, and I had a very good relationship with the White House. The Obama administration has never called me a single time. They know who I am, because we haven't had any funding since 2006. Yeah, they don't take constructive criticism very well. And of course, in my opinion, they are disoriented to the basic concepts that made this country great, which means they're disoriented to reality. And so President Obama wanted to change the terms and call it the, an overseas contingency operation. And he ignored the threat of radical Islam to the point where he did such bizarre things as bombing Gaddafi out of power. And of course, unintended consequences. Anybody can tell you what would happen, because now Libya is a broken, failed state. All the Islamists that Gaddafi had locked up in his jails, they're loose, heavily armed, and all over North Africa. Almost each and every step the president has made in terms of national security has been the wrong step. The one thing that he did right was to get eyes on target when he killed Osama bin Laden, based on good intelligence developed, of course, during the Bush administration. We had a brilliant tactical victory in Afghanistan, but he didn't have the wisdom to parlay that into a strategic victory. Because we are fighting an asymmetrical war against radical Islamic extremists. In Afghanistan, do you know how many Al-Qaeda are in Afghanistan? The CIA reports that less than 100. They're not there. When President Bush drove the Al-Qaeda out in 2001, they took to the hills. It's the Taliban that's in Afghanistan. The Taliban did not attack us on 9/11. They facilitated the Al-Qaeda to do it, but Al-Qaeda did it. Taliban just wants to drive all foreigners out of Afghanistan and reinstate their vision of a utopian state based on Sharia law. And so, regardless, though, the president, when he came into office in 2009, he had to make a decision. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And if you recall, the Democrats demonized President Bush in Iraq, and they said, you should have put all your forces in Afghanistan. And again, both presidents were wrong in their thinking, because they do not understand the function of the military. The military's job is to identify the enemy, identify their source of gravity, and crush them. Somehow we've got this Colin Powell idea that if you break it, you own it. Remember that? No, you don't. If you break it, it's broken. Who in the world said that we have an obligation to fix up Afghanistan or to fix up any country? In fact, quite the opposite. You can't fix up Afghanistan. You cannot fix up any of those countries in the Middle East. Their mentality is totally disoriented to the concepts that we take for granted. They have no idea of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. Those are foreign ideas. Now, there are onesies and twosies out there that understand that, but there's not enough to turn the tide to any degree whatsoever. And my response to other people is that, look, I'm sorry your country is in really bad shape. But, it's not my problem. As a nationalist, we look out for what is in our own national interest. So Afghanistan was a fool's errand from the very beginning. President Bush in 2001 shut down the Al-Qaeda training camps, which he should have done, drove the Taliban out of power. We should have left immediately and basically said, look, mess with us again and we'll be back. Because war will always be here. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and a few years back they were very concerned, and they said, they're good red-blooded American males. They said, Dad, we're afraid there won't be any more wars when we grow up, because they want to kill people. And I said, don't worry, son. As the Lord Christ said, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars until I come back. He's not back. Somehow liberals think that this is the last war, there'll never be another war. It's like changing the oil in your car. You've got to do it regularly and with alacrity. And when you use force, you use it in such a way that it deters other people. Right now, no one's afraid of us. The Chinese are buzzing our pilots. They're pushing out in all directions into territory that was claimed and owned by the Japanese, by Thailand and other countries. They don't care because they see weakness. The same with the Russians. And of course, ISIS is on the march and on the move. So in Afghanistan, the president by the grace of God, we killed Osama bin Laden. You cannot understand the negative impact that had on radical Islam. He was a mythic figure to him, to these people. For 10 years, he had evaded everything, and we killed him. And so the psychological blow was tremendous, but the president didn't have the brains to parlay that into a strategic victory. He should have got on TV immediately and said, "We win, you lose, we're leaving." Because there's no Berlin to capture over there. And the world would have bought that narrative. They'd say, yeah, that makes sense. Why in the hell else are you in Afghanistan? There's no other reason to be there. You're not going to reform that country. The day we leave, which is in 2014, we've lost. A CNN reporter asked President Obama, how do you define victory in Afghanistan? He said, quote, "I'm not comfortable with that word." Really? And so one of the things our center does too, and I don't have time to dwell on it, but we represent soldiers that are wrongfully accused with killing the enemy. And believe it or not, I've represented 18 cases that were charged with murder, and all of them were released. And my recent case I just did with rules of engagement, I had a lieutenant by the name of Waddell. His dad's a Navy SEAL in Dallas, called me up the day before Christmas 2 years ago and said, "Can you help my son?" Now, I only represent soldiers that are actually innocent. I don't represent those that murder and rape and rob, because we have bad apples. But this fellow was in Afghanistan, stepped on an IED and was wounded, went back for a second tour. His platoon was out in Afghanistan. One of his platoon members stepped on another IED, blew off both legs. And 3 days later, Lieutenant Waddell's on duty as the officer of the day, and he spots with his cameras a group of men digging a hole, planting another bomb. Now, the rules of engagement say you may not shoot these people unless they shoot at you first or you have a positive identification, because we're trying to win their hearts and their minds. So Lieutenant Waddell calls up headquarters and says, "Do you see what I see?" And they wring their hands for a while and finally agree, yep, that's the bad guy. And they give him permission to kill this person. But you can only use the least intrusive means, because we don't want to upset anybody with a big mortar or a M60 machine gun burst. And so he gets 2 Marine snipers. Any former Marines in here? Oh, good, I'll tell you the real story then. We have 2 Marine snipers, fire, miss, reload, fire, they hit the bad guy in the stomach and the leg. He goes down. Other people run out from the village, they put him up on a tractor and start to drive away. Now, the law of war would tell you to kill them all. The law of war would allow you to kill everybody that came out to assist him, because who would run out into a firefight unless you're an enemy combatant? The law of war would also say you don't need permission from mom to kill this guy in the first place, and kill him with the best weapons you have immediately. But the rules of engagement restrict our soldiers. They basically tie both hands behind the backs of our men and ask them to get slaughtered by these people, because they know our rules of engagement better than we do. So the lieutenant orders the snipers to shoot the tractor. He said, "I'm not letting this guy get away." They shoot the tractor, engine stops, bad guy rolls out, dies, no civilians killed, the right bad guy killed, 1 tractor wounded. What did the Marines do to him? They relieved him from his command and gave him a letter of reprimand, and in his official file say, "Never promote this fellow, he's a lieutenant." I immediately got on Fox News with Catherine Herridge and aired this story, got him on the front page of the Washington Examiner, front page of the Army Times, front page of the Marine Times, and within a year we had him promoted to captain, got all the paperwork out of his record, and that's what we got to do. Now, Josh is a great American. Josh told us when we first wanted to pursue this case, he said, "I don't want to do it because it's going to make the Marine Corps look bad." And his dad and I convinced him that it's not just for you, it's for all the soldiers out there that are getting screwed by the ROE, which was the title of the front page of the Army Times story. It said, "Screwed by the rules of engagement." So our soldiers aren't stupid. 25% of our casualties are from these friendly people we're training. And then we have rules of engagement that make you the criminal if you actually kill the enemy. And they know that they're being asked to die for what? Their commander-in-chief can't identify victory. And when we leave, we've lost. Now, if we can't identify victory, the jihadists can. Here's what they're going to say in Afghanistan in 2015. "We drove the Soviets out, and by Allah, we have driven the infidel Americans out, and thousands will flock to the banner of radical Islam because of the incompetence of this administration." Helen Keller could have figured this one out. When you killed Osama bin Laden, you get out and say, "We win, you lose." Now we're faced with ISIS right now. ISIS has attracted almost 300 U.S. personnel, Americans, I don't want to call them Americans, but they live in this country, to go out and join this organization. This is unprecedented. We never had these numbers before of people joining the jihadists. In Europe, the numbers are in the thousands. Why? Why all of a sudden? I've got this book here, and I'm not hawking books, but if you want to intellectually destroy liberals, it's all the ammo's here, from A to Z. It's $110 at Barnes & Noble's. I'm selling for $60, which is our cost. But in the book, I identify the problem with the ISIS and the jihadists and what they want. And there's also a Pew study that I quote. The Pew study said that of Muslim males in this country between the ages of 18 and 27, 25% of them believe that it's justified to murder to protect Islam. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. In Texas, we've had 5 major plots by radical Islamic extremists to kill us. One of them got through, and that was Hassan. Workplace violence, the Obama administration, of course. In the back of this book, I've got case after case after case of individuals tried in federal court for terrorism-related offenses. Because for terrorism-related offenses, the FBI has primary investigative authority, and the federal courts have primary obligation to prosecute. I teach at the FBI Academy 4 times a year for the last 8 years. A year and a half ago, though, I got a call from the guy that runs the program and said the program has been canceled by the Obama administration. And we could no longer mention Islam or radical Islam at the FBI Academy to train our agents unless the curriculum is vetted by an imam. And so the FBI still has me kind of come out there and speak, but I kind of code my language. But that's the type of surreal atmosphere we're operating in, where our leadership puts their head in the sand. And in Texas, as I said, we had one plot that occurred where a fellow had ordered some phenol from a warehouse in North Carolina. And when it was delivered here, the company in North Carolina called the FBI. And they did it based on profiling. There's a recent Supreme Court case that said it's okay to profile. And so somehow liberals say, oh, you can't profile. Yes, you can profile based on certain things, including religion, age, age, sex, and geographical location, as long as it's not the sole factors that you rely on. But there's so much disinformation out there, and we've had many, many plots that have occurred in terms of terrorism in this country. And of course, terrorism emanates from 3 sources: left wing, right wing, and radical Islam. 90% of all the terrorist cases tried by the federal courts have been radical Islamic extremists. They're not right wing, they're not left wing. But you know that the Obama administration, when they first came into office, they wanted to concentrate on the real threat, which was right-wing extremists. And they put out a memo, which I've got in this book also. Janet Napolitano put out a memo saying, here's the things we need to watch for, folks. We need to watch for people that are returning veterans. Me. We need to watch for people, anybody that thinks that we're not doing a good job securing the southern border. Me. And then she said something very incredible in the memo. Any American that believes in limited government, we've got to watch them. You can't make this stuff up. Janet, I don't know if you read the Constitution, but the 10th Amendment reserves all power to the people and states respectively, unless it's specifically given to the federal government. Who are these people? Anyway, I turned myself in. Literally, I emailed the White House and told them to come get me. Because if that's your definition of a right-wing extremist, I guess that's me. And I also put in there, you know, I've got a lot of guns in my house, and my liberal acquaintances at the law school, they always go, Addicott, why do you have all those guns? You don't need it for hunting. I don't keep them for hunting. Then they get real excited. The Second Amendment was given to us, we the people, so if we have to use our guns, didn't we write a nice little love letter to the Brits when in the course of human events it becomes necessary? Well, it's nice to say that you want to break away, but you better have the guns to do it. And we had to fight these people for 6 years under some brilliant leadership by George Washington and the grace of God and a little help from the French, and we did it. But that's how you win your freedom. That's what the Second Amendment is about. It's not about hunting Bambi. And also, part 2, the local constabulary will not be there at 3 o'clock in the morning when you need them. Now, we have a 2-story house. We live on this top story. And when I travel a lot, so I tell the wife and kids, I said, if somebody comes into the house, the alarm will go off. If they still keep coming, you know, get the riot-controlled Winchester short-barrel shotgun, which makes a distinctive noise at 3 in the morning when you chamber the round. If that doesn't drive them out, get down low at the top of the stairs, because they're going to be looking here, and cut them in half. And then, of course, And then I always say, and please go through their wallet to get whatever cash they've got out, because I got to drywall the walls and clean up the blood, and then call 911. That's why I keep guns. I don't know why anybody else keeps guns. You know, protect your family, protect yourself, protect your state, and if need be, to pick them up, you know, to protect your rights. That's why we have guns. And liberals get all excited. And of course, it took our Supreme Court almost 200 years before they finally said that, yeah, you know, you do have this inherent right to possess a firearm, which is another story, but I won't get into that. So, as a conservative, you know, and conservatives are easy to understand. When we have conferences, it's, you know, like God, guns, and barbecue. When liberals have conferences, the name is like 4 paragraphs long. You know, the rehabilitative nature of the social justice and jurisprudence in the societies of the undercoat. What the heck are they talking about? They have no idea what they're talking about either. Because they do not think clearly. They don't understand the foundations that made us a great country. Now, if you're going to win against radical Islam, which is a growing threat, and back to ISIS, the reason ISIS is so attractive right now is because the jihadists have seen nothing like this since the 7th century. These guys are right out of their playbook because Al-Qaeda is an underground movement. We closed down their terror training camps. They haven't, you know, they don't come up in a large way, and they're not capturing large areas of territory. ISIS is doing what happened in the 7th century with fire and sword. They're spreading out. They have hundreds of thousands of, well, tens of thousands of armed soldiers. They have billions of dollars of money, and they're capturing large areas of territory. And their position is, you convert or we cut your head off. And they're cutting heads off. They're crucifying people. And they're no nonsense about their approach. And that inspires the jihadists all over the world because they're now energized. Before, they didn't have anybody that they could point to and say, this person is really leading the way. ISIS is doing that. And it's like a huge magnet. So the way to stop this is we've got to target ISIS. Whether we want to or not, we've got to crush them. We can do that with air power and with some support from the Kurds. The Kurds love us. Sunnis don't like us. Shiites don't like us. Kurds have traditionally loved us. They're giving a safe haven to the Christians, and they're good fighters. All we had to do is use a couple of airstrikes around the dam in Mosul, and the Kurds shored up their front lines real quick. And if we could provide the air support, we can do it. And with Assad, you know, we've got to deal with Assad. Oh, but Assad's a bad guy according to Obama, and he has to go, just like Gaddafi. They're all bad guys. In World War II, we had evil 1 and evil 2. Stalin's evil 1, Hitler's evil 2. We aligned ourselves with evil 1, Stalin, to defeat evil 2, Hitler. When that was done, then we turned our guns on Stalin. It's called the Cold War. You have to be pragmatic. And yet liberals, of course, live in Never Never Land. They think if they just sprinkle magic fairy dust on people, that somehow it'll all be all right. When I was in the Pentagon, I was the deputy chief for the International Operation Law Division, and I remember the 90s, the mid-90s, that Madeleine Halfbright had, she cut a deal with the North Koreans. And she said, oh, I got a piece of paper like Chamberlain, you know, back in Hitler's day. They agree they will not build nuclear weapons. All we have to do is give money, food, cigars, and some cognac for the dear leader, and some nice nuclear fuel. And then they signed the agreement, and then, of course, when President Bush took office, the North Koreans set off an atomic weapon. And liberals were shocked. Oh, how could they lie to us? Really? If they can murder 2 million of their own people, don't you think they can lie to you? Not all liars are murderers, but all murderers are liars. And of course, I know we got some judges in the audience, and they know that. I mean, if you can murder a fortiori, you can lie. Now, I'm not a big Abe Lincoln fan because Abe Lincoln was one of our... Yeah, it always amuses me when Republicans say, well, you know, we're the party of Lincoln. Really? Where do you think big government started, folks? Abe Lincoln was the start of big government. I'm sure he has some good qualities, but I haven't found any yet. But I'll follow the story here. There's a story about Abe Lincoln in Washington City, and of course, if you're a strict constructionist as a conservative, it was called Washington City. He went to the jail there in Washington City, and there was he went to the jail cell there. He went to the first guy and said, my friend, why are you in jail? Oh, Mr. President, they say I murdered these people, but I didn't do it. I swear on my mother's grave and the lives of my children, I didn't do it. The president said, okay. He went to the next guy and said, my friend, why are you in jail? Mr. President, I said I robbed this bank, but I swear I didn't do it. Every day they torture me, they take me out and dunk me up and down in the outhouse. I didn't do it, you gotta help me. I'm being persecuted miserably. Okay. Went to the last guy on the line there, and he said, why are you in jail, my friend? He said, well, Mr. President, I was at this ice house, I got drunk, and I got in a fight over this good-looking redhead. I pulled out my boot knife and cut this dude up, long, deep, and continuous. I got 6 years, I've done 3 years, I'll be out a little bit longer. President immediately turned to Attorney General and said, I'm gonna pardon this young man that got in a knife fight because he's a terrible influence on all the innocent people here in jails. And that's the same process with Gitmo. They're all innocent. I've been to Gitmo, and President Bush rehabilitated, we had about 800 in there at one time. He rehabilitated hundreds of them. And of course, most of them lied, and they went back and joined the jihad. Now, the folks down there right now, the 160, they don't play that game like, yeah, I didn't do it. They'll look you in the eyes and say, I'm gonna kill you. Let me out of here. They're hardcore. And that's one of the things you gotta admire about jihadists. I was in the military for 20 years. I was never excited about dying for my country. 4 combat operations. I wanted to go back on Saturday night and drink a beer and fraternize with members of the opposite sex. You gotta say that in today's Obama's army. You know, these guys wanna die. So whatever you think about them, that's hardcore. Not many people are gonna die for what they believe in. It doesn't mean what they believe is true, but it means they're willing to die for it. I was giving a speech in Dania Beach in Florida, and the deputy commandant down there, it's a Coast Guard facility, he's pointing out where some of the 9/11 hijackers used to party. And these guys, there was a note in the rental car that was rented by Muhammad Atta, and it said, remember, paradise and the dark-eyed virgins waiting for you. If you're going to defeat these people, you've got to think like they think. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to defeat them. You can't wish things. You can't wish that people would be the way you want them to be. And that's what liberals do. They don't appreciate the enemy. They simply project their own disoriented view on people, and that's how they want everybody to be. And so what motivates these people? How do they actually think? It's a religious view. I did an interview with a Brazilian newspaper, and they were saying, is it because these youth, they're disenfranchised from society, is that why they joined? No. If poverty motivated jihad, everybody in Bangladesh would be a terrorist. Everybody in Haiti would be a terrorist. It's not about poverty. It's about religion. They are motivated by a religious belief. And what is that religious belief? And how do they think? Well, first of all, I got some news that probably most of you have figured out by now. But my young students in law school, they always get upset when I tell them this bit of news. But nobody in this room has ever had an original thought. Nobody. And you never will. You tell me what your thoughts are. As a historian, I'll tell you where you got them. King Solomon wrote in a book called Ecclesiastes, there is nothing new under the sun. That's 3,000 years ago. The issue is not that you're going to think a new thought. The issue is you hear all the information that's out there and you decide what side of the fence you're going to line up on. And I really hate law professors and other, distinguished speakers. They go, well, I don't have a position. Really? Are you a bowl of Jell-O? Of course you got a position. Just tell me that you're a liberal and we'll go from there. Tell me you're a conservative, we'll go from there. I'm a conservative. And the Tea Party's almost too liberal for me. I'm so conservative. I mean, I'm such a strict constructionist. When I do the Pledge of Allegiance, I don't say one nation indivisible. I don't believe it. That's in violation of our forefathers, because when they sent that letter to the Brits, they didn't believe that you're indivisible for all times. You have the right to pick up your guns and secede if things get tough. I'm not advocating secession, but I don't believe it. Who stuck those words in there? Well, the Pledge of Allegiance was written by some Yankees after the war between the states to indoctrinate our kids here in the South, that they may not pick up guns ever again. That's where it came from. We put the under God part in the 20th century, which I'll say that part, but I don't say the other part. I don't believe it. And I do not believe the Gettysburg Address either. That's more Yankee propaganda. You ever listen to the end of the Gettysburg Address, what they make you say it all the time? What does it say? Basically, Lincoln saying, I've got to kill all these people, which is my great-granddaddy and my wife's great-granddaddy. I've got to kill all these people so we can have a government of the consent. What? Remember? So the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the land. You've got to kill me to make a government of the consent. That's an oxymoron. You can't have a government of the consent where the way you make a government of the consent is at gunpoint. That's not a government of the consent, Abe. We didn't consent. I'm from Alabama, remember? And the Texans back then didn't consent either. But it sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds wonderful. But Tea Party folks, we're deep thinkers, so we can kind of see through all that nonsense. I've got to deprogram my kids when they come home from school, and I've got to deprogram the law students. My critics always say, Addicott, you never give the other side. You know what my answer is? You live in the other side. You don't hear my side. Oh, wow. Okay, so in any event, here's how these people think. And let's take another thing, because it's about religion, so I'm not going to get up here and try to proselytize anybody, but we're all riding a death train, right? Nobody gets out of here alive. Now, some of y'all are a little further down the tracks, but it's going to make a stop. And when it stops, you're off the train. And you're going to go into your eternity. But where are you going? Well, there are 7 major religions that have left their doctrines in writing for us to consider. Now, why are you what you are? In other words, why is Islam the fastest growing religion in the world? Is it because of the efficacy of the belief? No. They have a lot of kids. So you are what you are probably because your parents were that way. You're a Baptist because your parents are Baptist. You're a Catholic, your parents are Catholic. You're a Muslim, your parents are Muslim. Most Muslims have not read the Quran. 85% of the folks in Afghanistan, they cannot read or write. They don't know what the Quran says. They're Muslims because they're born into it. So you got a 1 in 7 chance of being in the right religion just off the bat. But what if you're in the wrong one? Because all of them say, we're the truth, the other ones are lies. Well, if you're a deep thinker, I would think you probably should have at least done one of those short versions and looked at the other religions to see, well, maybe I'm in the wrong one. And of course, as the Lord Christ said, he said he was not a unifier. Most churches would not have Christ come speak because he's too divisive. He said, if you stand for what I stand for, I'll set father against mother, husband against wife. You believe in what I'm telling you. He was not a unifier at all because he was very dogmatic. It's my way or the highway. So, the 7 major religions, all religions have something in common. C.S. Lewis wrote this in his book, Mere Christianity. There's no such thing as a Christian morality. The Buddhists have the same morality. It's called the middle path. Islam has the pillars of Islam. Confucianism, be a good citizen. All religions say the moral code's the same. Don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat. Be a good person, pick up trash, all that stuff. Be a good moral person. All religions have the same basic moral code. The goal of all religions is the same. When you die, you want to go to heaven, not to hell. All religions basically recognize that man is no damn good, and God is good. So they all have that in common. The difference is the mechanics. How do you go from life to God? How do you have union with God? And there you have 2 schools of thought. 6 of them believe that it's a system of works. You follow the moral code, be the best little boy or the best little girl you can possibly be, and try to stay away from the big sins. And when you die, you'll go before the judgment seat. In Islam, they call it the judgment seat of Allah. Muhammad was asked, are you going to paradise? You know what Muhammad said? I don't know. I will be judged by Allah, and he will judge my good deeds and bad deeds, and maybe I'll get in, maybe I won't. So it's a work system, and they never tell you, if you get to the age of 80, can I party now? No, they never tell you you're in. And of course, they always want to hit you up for money. That always comes in there too. They never tell you you're in. It's always, I hope I'm good enough. I hope I'm doing the right thing. Now contrast that with Christianity 101. And I do read the Greek. I'm not too hot in the Hebrew. But that's a system of grace. You've heard the word, but what does it really mean? Well, there's no works. Absolutely no works. For example, a thief on the cross who at first denounced the Messiah, he said, Kyrios, which means Lord. In the first century, that word meant God. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. Did he do any good deeds? No. Did he get dunked in water? Nope. Did he say, I'm sorry? No. And what was the answer? You're in. Very easy. Very easy. What is it? Genesis 15, verse 6? Abraham was saved. 500 years before Moses was born. No Mosaic law to keep. No rituals. How was he saved? It says, Abraham believed in the Lord. It was credited to his account for righteousness. The Lord, of course, was a coming Messiah. He looked forward to the event. We look back. So Christ on the cross died for every sin that every human ever did, past, present, and future. past, present, and future, the ones you haven't done yet. And so the sin issue's off the table. Now all you gotta do is say, I'll take it. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 to 9. With one speck of faith, more than none at all, that's all you got to exhibit. About the size of an electron going around an atom. Not very much at all. And boom, you're in, you can never get out. That's why it's called the good news, not almost the good news. Oh, you mean I can go out? Yes, I mean exactly that. Because you're going to do it anyway. And if you don't do it, you think it. So yes, that's why it's called the good news. So that's grace. Now here's why have I told you all that stuff? Well, one, it sets up the discussion of the jihadists. Here's what the jihadists say. If you die in jihad, the first drop of your blood shed, you don't go to the judgment seat of Allah and have to work your way into heaven. You automatically bypass Allah's judgment seat and go straight to paradise. It's a grace system, but it's not really a grace system because what do you got to do? You got to kill yourself. And it doesn't count if you almost kill yourself. Hassan is not automatically going to heaven. He's the guy at Fort Hood. But he gets some extra brownie points because he tried. But he's not automatically in. You must die in jihad. And when you go to jihad, again, there's no weighing of your morality at all. You're in. And so that's why the 9/11 hijackers, they partied. They went to strip bars. You can't do that in classical Islam. You can't. There's a lot of taboos, a lot of morality associated. You can't do that stuff. They drank, they partied, they did all that stuff. Because they knew they were going to die, they weren't going to be judged, they're going to go straight to paradise. And of course, you get extra benefits when you go to paradise. You get 70 supernaturally created virgins. Now men, men we basically have certain things we like about female pulchritude. I'm going to use my professor language, not my military language. So every man has an idea about female pulchritude. So for example, men, if you like women with big feet, they're going to be ginormous feet in your harem. Right to your specifications. Plus, you get 2 women you saw here on the earth that are humans to come into your harem. Now, I've traveled around the world a lot. If it's true, it's going to be Texas, Mississippi, or Alabama. I haven't seen much else. And did you ever wonder why when they interview the mothers of these nut jobs, and they said, what about Ahmed? What do they always say? Oh, wonderful son, Ahmed. I wish I had 10 more just like him. We're going to name a school after him. Because you get 70 of your relatives get to bypass the judgment seat of Allah if Ahmed says so. If you say anything bad about him, he's listening, he'll strike your name off the list. Now, we might think this is very silly, but they believe it to the point of death. It doesn't mean it's true, again. It doesn't mean it's true, but it means that they believe it to be true. People will not die for a lie, but they'll die for what they believe is true. Now, I don't believe it's true. I'm a pretty good person, but I'm not kidding myself. You can't work your way into perfection. Impossible. And so that's what they do. So in the short term, how do you deal with somebody? As an attorney, we like to negotiate. What do you want? If I could get somebody from Gitmo right here and sit them in a chair, what do you want? You know what their answer is? We want to kill you. That's our negotiating position. In fact, in the book, I've got a story about Half-Dead Bob. Half-Dead Bob, we nursed him back to health. We picked him up on the battlefield of Afghanistan, had tuberculosis, missing a lung, shrapnel wounds. If you believe the New York Times, what do we do to him? Well, we torture him every day, of course. No, we nursed him back to health. And he told the commandant, he said, Commandant, you're a good Christian man, but you do know when I get out of here, I'm going to kill you and your family. That's just the way it is. Now, the Boston Marathon attack is the latest attack we've had on the homeland. Won't be the last. And I'm sure that many of those people running that marathon, they weren't conservatives. They're wearing those purple spandex things. You see these guys riding their bicycles wearing purple spandex, and they're jogging to save the whales. They don't care that you're a liberal, that you don't like America. They're going to kill you anyway. They will kill anybody. They've killed more Muslims than they've killed Christians or Jews. You want to do body counts. And they have no guilt complex at all about killing people, women, children, whatever. Inspire magazine is the Al-Qaeda magazine. You can Google it and read it. The latest edition says, remember, brothers, it's good to attack the buildings, but make sure that people are there. We want to kill as many people as possible. That's what they want to do. So ISIS is a growing movement. We've got to crush them because psychologically, in order to stop people gravitating towards these folks, you've got to crush them and kill them and stack them like cordwood for a cold winter's night. That's how you deal with them in the short term. In the long term, you have to close down the Hitler youth camps and turn these people out. That tell them that you go to paradise by killing other people. Again, Afghanistan, 85% of them, they don't read or write. And yet, the Saudis fund a lot of this stuff. We have groups around this country, there's a group called the MOA, Muslims of America. They're funded by a billionaire out of Pakistan. What they do is they buy up property, and they preach radical Islam on their property. They shoot guns, they raise the black flag of radical Islam. All of this is not illegal. It's only illegal if you conspire to engage in violence, solicit someone to engage in violence yourself, or provide material support to terrorism. There's a camp right outside of Austin, and yet the people that live in Austin, they've never heard of it. Never heard of it. Because it's politically incorrect to criticize Islam. Now imagine if the KKK built a KKK compound outside of Austin and marched around with their white sheets on and shot off guns. I guarantee you every day the Austin Statesman would have editorials and articles and demanding that something be done. News media cameras would be outside the gates every day filming them. Outrageous, outrageous, and yet nothing about these murderers that are marching around. Potential murderers. And these are camps called MOA. There are lots of them sprinkled all across the United States. All across the United States. And yet nobody says anything. I've debated on Fox News members from CARE, Council on Arab Domestic Relations, weasels. Off camera, they're the most vile people you could ever hope to meet. And I invited 3 of them to meet me outside in the parking lot next to my pickup truck after we did our interview so I could discuss with them certain things. And of course, they didn't take me up on the invitation. Okay, so I think I've probably talked a lot, but I'd like to leave you with one thought, and I'll take some questions that Harry Truman once said. They said, you know, what's your opinion of history? And he said, it's just one damn thing after the other.